U.S. Prime Minister, October 26, 2025. Two Venezuelan Su-30 combat aircraft had just crossed the red line. 4 KH-31 high-speed projectiles were released from their launch rails. Their intended destination was the U.S. Navy's $2 billion floating fortress, the USS Thomas Hudner. This was no exercise. This was the story of 20 breathless minutes that would decide everything. A modern naval shield was about to face a nearly flawless test. The only question was simple. Would it hold? Across the calm waters of the Caribbean Sea, a bold act of pressure shattered the silence. Yet this story did not begin with the sound of engines cutting through the sky. It began far above the planet, 350 kilometers above Earth in the frozen darkness of orbit. An unblinking eye was watching. The KH-11 reconnaissance satellite, a technological marvel known for its extraordinary imaging power, observed every movement below. From Venezuela's La Orchila Air Base, it captured more than just aircraft preparing for departure. It captured a message. On the runway were two Su-30MK, two Flanker G aircraft, each powered by twin AL-31FP engines, giving them the ability to perform demanding aerial maneuvers. This aircraft is widely regarded as one of Russia's most capable 4.5-generation combat platforms. Beneath their wings, they carried something even more serious, the KH-31 supersonic anti-ship system, a signal that could not be ignored. To much of the world, the Caribbean Sea may look peaceful, but beneath the surface, it is a region where political pressure can rise without warning. Venezuela, determined to assert its sovereignty and challenge the American presence, chose a move of extraordinary risk. Its leadership believed it held the winning card, a surprise maneuver that could embarrass the world's leading naval power. On the map, the boundary between international waters and Venezuelan territorial waters is only a thin line. But on this day, the Su-30s were not simply flying alongside it. They were heading straight toward it, ready to test how far the American vessel would allow them to go. Beyond that line, the USS Thomas Hudner was conducting a freedom of navigation patrol in international waters. The Arleigh Burke-class vessel was far more than a massive structure of steel. It was a floating fortress, a mobile command center, and most importantly, it carried the Aegis combat system, one of the most advanced naval defense networks ever placed at sea. Its mission that day appeared routine: protect freedom of navigation and help ensure that sea lanes remained open to all. But the U.S. Navy rarely plays the game blindly. In fact, the Americans had been watching from the very beginning. 500 kilometers away, an E-2D Hawkeye Command and early warning aircraft was patrolling the sky. With its large radar dome rotating above its fuselage, it served as the eye in the sky, sending a continuous stream of information back to the ship. At 2:10 p.m., the Hawkeye detected two Su-30s lifting off from the runway. It tracked their route, altitude, and external loadout even before the Hudner's own radar could confirm the picture. From the instant the aircraft left the ground to the moment they became a direct challenge, exactly 20 minutes passed. For Venezuela, it was a short window to raise the stakes. What they did not realize was that with every passing second, they were moving deeper into a situation that had already been prepared for. Inside the Combat Information Center of the Hudner, the atmosphere was quiet, focused, and heavy with tension. This was the mind of the ship. The AN/SPY 1DV radar system swept invisible waves across the sky again and again, building a three-dimensional electronic awareness dome around the vessel. Almost immediately, two targets appeared on the screen, moving low and fast in a tight strike formation. They ignored every radio call. Their IFF transponders remained completely silent. The SLQ-32 electronic warfare system began analyzing their emissions at once. Only seconds later, the combat information officer's voice came over the loudspeaker. Calm, cold, and exact. Identity confirmed. Two Venezuelan Su-30s carrying KH-31P systems. Bearing 090. Distance 50 miles. The ESM system confirmed the loadout. Russian-made KH-31P anti-ship projectiles. Their purpose was clear. They were designed to threaten heavily protected naval vessels equipped with the Aegis system. With a speed of Mach 3.5 and the ability to fly extremely close to the sea surface, they were among the most difficult threats to detect and track. These Su-30s were not simply observing. Their radar modes were changing. They were preparing to lock onto the target. This was no longer a training scenario. This was a real-world test. Then it happened. Vampire. That single word meant an incoming anti-ship threat was now on approach. On the screen, two projectiles separated from the Su-30s and accelerated with breathtaking speed. Like two steel spears nearly 5 meters long, powered by fuel and carrying a high-energy payload, they raced across the sea at nearly 1,200 meters per second. Venezuela had crossed the red line. It was a calculated provocation, a direct attempt to test the American presence in the region. But they had made a critical mistake. They believed the move would come as a surprise. They thought regional tensions would give them the perfect opening to challenge the United States at sea. What they did not know was that the Aegis system aboard the USS Thomas Hudner had already been tracking, calculating, and predicting the scenario before the projectiles were even released. Now the real contest began, not between people but between machines. A race of speed, algorithms, timing, and physics. The two KH-31 projectiles crossed the 50-kilometer mark and closed the distance rapidly. The first and most advanced layer of defense came alive. The SLQ-32 system, a complex network of antennas, processors, and transmitters, began its work. It did not launch a single physical round. Instead, it captured the active radar homing signal coming from the KH-31 seeker, subtly reshaped it, and sent it back. The goal was simple: convince the projectile's guidance system that the ship was somewhere else. At the same moment, the order was given: deploy decoys. The Mark 36 SRBO-C system activated. A cloud of countermeasures spread into the air, creating large false radar targets around the vessel. At the same time, high-temperature flares formed a thermal maze designed to confuse any infrared tracking sensors. The purpose was to turn the real ship into a ghost, hidden inside a storm of false images. The result came almost instantly. One KH-31 was misled and locked onto the false target. It shifted course sharply, moving away from the destroyer and into the decoy field. Seconds later, it dropped into the sea, kilometers away from the ship. The first threat had been neutralized without the Hudner using a single, live defensive round. But the second projectile was different. Whether because of stronger programming, a better seeker, or simple chance, it pushed through the invisible barrier. It had not been stopped, but it had been weakened. The electronic defense forced it to burn nearly 20% of its precious energy, yet it was still racing toward the target. Electronic warfare had only half succeeded, but it had done something vital. It bought time and preserved ammunition for the next layer of defense. The second KH-31 was now only 30 kilometers away, and it was still moving at Mach 3.5. The time before impact was now less than 25 seconds. This was the moment for the third defensive layer to take over: long-range interception. The TAO officer's voice sounded again through the Combat Information Center, calm, sharp, and controlled. Confirm SM-6 launch. Engage the designated target. On the forward deck, inside the Mk-41 vertical launch system, a Standard Missile 6 rose from its cell. It was a technological masterpiece worth $4 million, built for moments exactly like this. The interceptor launched straight upward, its powerful engine driving it beyond 30 kilometers in altitude. Then it turned downward, diving at a steep angle and accelerating beyond Mach 3.5. This was no longer just a pursuit. It was a contest between two supersonic machines, each racing through the sky with only seconds to decide the outcome. 20 kilometers from the Hudner, the SM-6 found its target. It met the KH-31 in midair, releasing a violent burst of energy. A cloud of gray smoke expanded across the sky as both objects vanished from the radar picture. A $4 million interceptor had just protected a $2 billion warship and the lives of 300 sailors. After two failed attempts, it seemed Venezuela might step back. But instead, the situation intensified. Determined to project strength, the opposing aircraft pushed forward with an even riskier move. Then came the unexpected turn. The opposing side had prepared a clever tactic. Using the confusion created by the first KH-31's failure, along with electronic interference and the massive burst from the SM-6 intercept, the two Su-30s released two more KH-31 projectiles. For a brief moment, the sky itself became their cover. The second pair slipped through the outer defensive network. They were now inside the minimum engagement range of the SM-6 and only 15 kilometers away. The time to contact was less than 12 seconds. There was no opportunity for another SM-6 launch. The incoming projectiles had entered the ideal envelope of the next defensive layer, the medium-range guard, the evolved Sea Sparrow missile, known as ESSM. This time, different VLS cells opened, but instead of holding one large interceptor, each cell carried 4 ESSMs. This was concentrated defensive firepower. 4 ESSMs launched almost at the same time, their white trails curving across the sky. The ESSM was built for agility. It could reach Mach 4 and perform extreme maneuvers of up to 50 G thanks to its thrust vectoring control system. In many ways, it behaved like a tiny unmanned fighter, reacting instantly to every movement in front of it. It did not need the ship to guide it every step of the way. With semi-active seekers and mid-course update capability, the interceptors surged toward their assigned targets. One ESSM locked onto the third KH-31, adjusting its path in milliseconds as the incoming object attempted to maneuver. The intercept was sudden and precise. The threat disappeared in a powerful shockwave. The fourth KH-31 was struck by another ESSM. It was not completely broken apart, but its seeker and guidance systems were disabled. Yet it was still moving. No longer guided, no longer controlled, it had become a 500-kilogram mass of metal racing toward the ship. It was no longer a functioning projectile, but it was still a serious danger. Only 5 kilometers remained. 5 seconds, 4 seconds, 3 seconds. Then the final defensive line came alive. The last steel wall. The close-in weapon system, CIWS, began to operate. Its independent two-band radar locked onto the incoming object with absolute precision. In a fraction of a second, the fire control computer calculated the final firing solution. Then the 6-barrel M61 Vulcan Gatling gun came alive. The sound was overwhelming, a 20mm cannon spinning at 4,500 rounds per minute. But it was not relying on dramatic bursts or heavy payloads. It fired solid tungsten armor-piercing rounds, dense and incredibly hard, designed to tear apart anything still moving toward the ship. The stream of tungsten struck the incoming object with brutal precision. Piece by piece, the 500-kilogram payload section was broken into smaller and smaller fragments. What had once been a serious threat became a scattered cloud of harmless debris, falling into the sea hundreds of meters away from the vessel. Then, silence returned to the Combat Information Center. Only seconds earlier, the tactical screen had been filled with red warning icons and intersecting approach paths. Now it was empty. 4 advanced Russian-made anti-ship systems, once presented as the pride of the Venezuelan Air Force, were now reduced to useless fragments resting somewhere beneath the Caribbean waves. The 2 Su-30s turned back toward base. From the moment the first incoming threat was detected to the final fragment falling into the water, the entire defensive sequence lasted less than 90 seconds. The USS Thomas Hudner remained untouched. But this was more than a successful defense. The message sent to Caracas and to anyone else watching was impossible to miss. Testing the U.S. Navy in international waters is not a show of strength. It is an extremely dangerous mistake. Caracas had learned the lesson. Advanced technology combined with relentless human training can create a barrier that is almost impossible to break through. The sailors aboard the Hudner did not panic. They did not hesitate. They simply performed their duties with the calm professionalism that comes only after tens of thousands of hours of drills, simulations, and preparation. As the USS Thomas Hudner continued its patrol, the sea slowly returned to calm. This was not a crisis, it was a test, and the U.S. Navy passed it with a flawless result. Today's lesson, written in radar traces, missile smoke, and lines of code, is simple. In modern conflict, never challenge the system built by those who understand every rule of the game. What do you think? Which of the 5 defensive layers impressed you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And for more in-depth stories about military technology, naval defense, and modern strategy, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching.